This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
Just ahead on Carolina Impact.
Closed because of the coronavirus. It's a situation facing every school right now. I'm Jeff Sonyer. Stick around. We'll take a closer look at distance learning and how it works, or in some cases, how it doesn't work for your kids at home.
Younger generations of Holocaust survivors tell their family's powerful story.
I'm Jason Terza, standing alongside Beatty's Ford Road at perhaps Charlotte's most significant historical landmark, the Battle of the Bees. But was Charlotte really referred to as a Hornets Nest of rebellion, or is it just urban legend? We'll dig a little deeper to find out.
Carolina Impact starts right now.
Carolina Impact, covering the issues, people, and places that impact you. This is Carolina Impact.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Amy Burkett. As we go through unprecedented times with the coronavirus, our lives have changed so dramatically in such a short time. It seems every 24 hours things take a new turn as we battle the COVID-19 virus. One dramatic shutdown affects our children's education as schools on every level have closed with no immediate plans to reopen. The new educational path is distance learning. Teachers and students connect virtually, and school happens online. Carolina Impact's Jeff Sonyer has more on what that looks like. Jeff?
Yeah, schools are closed, but CMS and other school systems still technically open, shifting learning from the classroom to the comfort of your own home. Of course, online learning, distance learning is really nothing new. A lot of schools have been doing it for years, but now all schools are doing it, not necessarily because they want to, but because they have to, because of the virus and the lockdown surrounding the virus. The schools really don't have a choice. These hurry-up high school hallways are empty and echoey now.
I would get more specific here. It says just create a Quizlet on them.
No crowded classrooms and cafeterias and canceled events where coronavirus can spread. No buses waiting to take kids home because they're already home. School's out for now, and for this school year, maybe out for good.
We recognize that we are in a very fluid and very fast-moving health crisis. We are going to continue to monitor this situation closely and make plans for dealing with the very real possibility of a longer closure period.
This shaky video is from a Facebook Live meeting of the school board. Facebook is as close as we can get right now, as CMS and all the other school systems all try and figure out what comes next.
And we will be working with our teachers, and our teachers will be working directly with our families to push out digital learning opportunities for their students over the next 2.5 weeks until we know more about when we can come back to school.
Ms. Callahan?
Yes.
I had a question.
For now, Mason Callahan's classroom is her dining room table.
Which test is it, Nick?
It's the Beowulf, Unit 1 test.
She's an English teacher at Myers Park High School, meeting with her morning and afternoon honors classes online.
Wait, so we got bell ringers?
No, we're not. I'm not going to be able to check your bell ringer since we're not face-to-face.
They can't see each other because CMS doesn't allow webcams to protect privacy. But Callahan and her students can live message each other, and they can hear each other.
I already did those assignments.
Oh, you did all the assignments. That's good. So then you don't have anything to worry about until Monday. My heart hurts for those kids. You know, I'm an English teacher and I spend my days with them. I want to be with them. I want to see them.
You'd rather have them in the class and you'd rather have them, together as they're used to.
I do think it is great that we have this platform where at least they can hear me, check in on them, even if it's not that face-to-face communication.
It's our first time out since Thursday.
Keisha Perry has her month-old daughter in the stroller, her 4-year-old son on the scooter, and her 12-year-old home from school here at Sedgefield Middle, ready to pick up where he left off.
I like the fact that they still have work for them to do while they're out of school.
Yeah. But this CMS mom isn't so sure that distance learning, the only kind of learning there is right now, is the best kind of learning for her kids.
With my son, he doesn't really like the Chromebook either because he has the ADHD problem, so he really likes the pages better. So I don't know.
It's a similar story on Charlotte's shut-down college campuses. What's it normally like in here?
People going back and forth, dropping in, talking about ideas. Oh, I just tried this new thing in class.
We're talking with Shannon Blair on her last day in the office until, well, whenever the next day is. Blair is helping her new online students at Central Piedmont Community College and her fellow online teachers get used to this new, not so normal.
You're probably thinking it's a little odd that I'm in my kitchen, in my bathrobe, hair undone.
This is Blair's online intro to English 111 as professors and their students begin working from home. Come as you are.
But that's how life is, and that's the blessing of technology, that we can work remotely and achieve our goals different ways.
Blair is also using the coronavirus crisis itself as an online teaching tool in some classes.
And I noticed for my online students, when I sent out the message, there was already some activity. You know, I could see in the Google document that I was sharing, you know, the anonymous profiles of people in there reading the material, but it's been very quiet. And that tells me they're either waiting for my direction and my lead, or they're in panic mode, which I hope they're not in panic mode.
It's like, do I have to retake these classes over again because we're not in class? It's not the same.
Learning in class is one thing, learning from your front porch,
not
exactly the same. Yeah. We first met Selena Cortez over a year ago when she took part in PBS Charlotte's 3D project, Dreamers, Doers, Destiny.
I love assisting other people, protecting them from harm.
This is her I Have a Dream speech. Now she's an Opportunity Scholarship recipient at Central Piedmont Community College, working to make that dream a reality. For Cortez, moving her classes to a computer because of coronavirus, well, it's complicated.
Like right now I'm taking anatomy. We have lab, and that's really difficult for us because it was supposed to be our dissection week. Same thing with my paramedic class. It's hands-on, it's a real thing. So it affects me a lot because I'm supposed to graduate next May, and everything that's happening now, I feel like it's gonna be farther away.
Yeah, so many questions about grades and graduation, all boiling down to the one central question. How much longer will the schools be closed? How much longer will a computer take the place of a classroom teacher? And how's that going to affect our kids going forward? Amy?
Thanks so much, Jeff. PBS Charlotte has been in the education business since we went on the air back in 1965. We want to help during these difficult times and have changed our programming in the afternoons to provide distance learning for middle and high schools. Weekdays between 11:30 and 3:30, our content will be tied to both North and South Carolina state standards in social studies, literature, and science. Teachers and caregivers can access online lesson plans that go along with the on-air content, as well as access over 100,000 digital resources at WTVI.PBSLearningMedia.org anytime. Now, there are free tutorials there to help you navigate all the high-quality content. So we move now from new realities to never forgetting the past. Survivors of the Holocaust have shared their stories for almost 75 years. Here in Charlotte, a father-daughter duo, the next generation from the survivors' story, share their family's story. It's a new voice and a new way to get us to never forget. Carolina Impact's B. Thompson shares more.
For many, these are simply pictures from history, from a war long ago. But how do you tell the story of the killing of 6 million Jews and make it real?
We tell the story of the Holocaust through the eyes of a little girl whose life was disrupted and family killed. That girl is my mother and our grandmother, and her name is Paula Shemiavich.
Meet Yoshi Shamavi and his daughter Ella. They are telling the story of Paula, who is his mom and her grandmother. She survived 2 of the infamous Nazi death camps. Ella first heard the extent of her grandmother's survival and rescue through the Steven Spielberg project of Holocaust stories. It was the first time Ella and her dad really heard and understood what Paula lived through and what she still remembers.
And what is etched in my mind is the barbed wire, the electric wire.
Hearing about my great-grandparents dying in the ghetto and hearing about almost all of her siblings getting killed, hearing about her sister and her body getting thrown off a moving train by a Nazi. None of that is easy to hear. We believe this is her sister, Fella.
But it's a story this millennial and her dad are now committed to sharing. They speak to school groups and others about Paula's life. It's all part of a broader public program sponsored by the Stan Greenspon Center for Peace and Social Justice at Queen's University. It's more than just a personal history lesson through one family. It's about the bigger lessons of what can happen and what did happen.
People who weren't actively involved in the killings or actively involved in the persecution, but they just stood by and watched. And society has decided, I think, determined that being a bystander is very detrimental and dangerous, that we can't stand by and watch as things happen.
They were in Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp in Poland. This was the largest and most infamous death camp built to carry out what the Germans called the final solution.
But we had to struggle alone. And then it became a war of survival, to stay alive, not to die of starvation, not to get killed, and not to be taken to the ovens.
Of the nearly 1.3 million people who were sent to Auschwitz, 1.1 million were killed primarily in gas chambers. Yet Paula's story has twists and turns, including how a child so young could survive.
If she was younger than 7 years old and when the war started, I don't think she would have had a chance to survive because they wouldn't have needed her to work.
Her job? To sew clothing for German soldiers and to clear away the rubble in towns that had been bombed by the Allies. According to the Holocaust Museum, roughly 6 to 11% of European Jewish children survived. Paula was part of that small number of children who made it out of the death camps. In April of 1945, Paula and the other children were liberated by the British and placed in displaced persons camps, ultimately moving as a group to Israel, where she met her husband, Yoshi's father. But why continue to tell the story? According to the Greenspon Center, which shares the story of Holocaust survivors in this area through its Heritage Testimonial Project, the need has never been more urgent.
It's even more important to have individuals understand that what we call bullying and what we just see as verbal abuse on the playground and individuals hurting one another, we hear about this all the time in the news. It's more important to be an upstander and to stand up.
In the year 2020, you see the statistics that anti-Semitism is on the rise in the United States. It's hard to imagine. And that is the motivation that gives us, propels us to go and share the story as much as possible.
And as this millennial points out, her grandmother, who lives in Israel, is 87 years old. And there will be a time when she can no longer tell her story. So Ella and her dad, second and third generations of a survivor, see that bigger picture.
Why it's important to tell her story is so that people understand what can happen when fear and indifference and hatred take hold. And when people start to collaborate with hate, unimaginable things can happen.
For this father-daughter team, it is a labor of love. It is a story of survival. It is a lesson that gives life to the words, never forget. For Carolina Impact, I'm B. Thompson reporting.
A story that I will learn.
Thanks so much, B. If you're interested in learning more about the speakers in the Charlotte area who can bring a personal story about the Holocaust to life, there's a Speakers Bureau, and we've got it listed on our website. Well, have you taken a DNA test? Some 30 million Americans have. It's amazing to think that you can spit into a cup and results show you exactly where in the world you're from. PBS will explore this issue with a new series by Ken Burns in April called The Gene, An Intimate History. Carolina Impact's Suzette Rhee explains.
It's a special night for the genealogy community in Charlotte. They have a celebrity genealogist in their midst, and Kenyatta Berry confirms the huge impact of these.
Once you get your Ancestry DNA kit, there are...
The DNA test in Americans learning about ourselves.
DNA has definitely changed the game, for sure.
She should know, as one of the hosts of PBS's Genealogy Roadshow.
Remember, we're talking about two extraordinary brothers.
Barry traveled the country meeting and solving the genealogy mysteries of so many, including herself.
You know, for me, it gave me a connection back to Africa, right from the results that I had, that I didn't have before. But, you know, one of the things that I find in my work is that people take a DNA test and then they say, now what?
The now what can lead in so many directions. The process seems simple enough. You order a kit online, you send in a saliva sample, you're sent the results in an email, and depending on what you've paid to learn, you can learn where you're from, health and medical issues. It can lead to scientifically identifying people who are related to you.
So much good that can come out of it. It verifies your genealogical research. It gives you that branch of the family you didn't know. If your parents died young, it gives you some information. If you're adopted, maybe you find some folks that you're related to from a biological family. So there's a lot of good that comes with it. I just think people need to be ready for whatever happens.
Well, my father would not talk about his family at all.
That inspired Margot Scurry to study her family and, yes, take the DNA test.
So I think DNA is just a wonderful piece of technology that allows us to get more information that would help us to broaden that search. I think it's great because for African Americans, there's very few of us who have been able to actually make the leap back to Africa. So,
You see the value in it?
Oh, I definitely do. I think when you know where you come from, it helps you to just be strengthened as a person, as a people.
Others agree that science has infused new energy to those who want to know more.
I had done genealogy for years the old-fashioned way and looking through microfilm and everything. I'd pretty much decided, well, these are questions that I'll never answer. I'd checked every source that I thought possibly could be checked. And then DNA came along and I said, wow, whole new world.
There is so much to learn, and that's what the Ken Burns series, The Gene, is about. It will give a history of the human genome while exploring the breakthroughs that genes play on heredity, disease, and behavior. We'll learn of the early gene hunters, the race to read the entire human genome, and the genetic discoveries that are called some of the greatest achievements in the history of science. Here in Charlotte and across the country, genealogy groups are growing and gene workshops are getting attention. Leading the next gene workshop in Charlotte is Queen Norwood Thompson, whose ancestors were enslaved.
I found them. We were here. We might have not been the aristocrats, but we carved the roads. We made the clothes. We played a significant part in making Mecklenburg County and our nation what it is today.
And in this room full of genealogy enthusiasts, learning about their DNA individually and collectively is something to celebrate.
Previously, people only had paper records. They could look at deeds and wills and old Bibles and all kinds of things like that, but this is a whole another layer of definitive proof.
Genealogy veterans like Barry call DNA testing the Wild West. So new and fascinating, but a world that needs more research and perhaps more laws for protection. But the DNA, some of the fundamental secrets of the gene, is now accessible to all of us, and many here believe that's a good thing.
It starts to create more of a broader view of the world. You no longer just live in this little neighborhood, or your family maybe never left the specific neighborhood. Now you can see that stretch across borders, across countries, across oceans, and it gives you a much bigger picture of your family and the world as a whole.
Suzette joins me now, and these genealogy workshops are all the rage. We just had a successful one here at PBS Charlotte not long ago, but there are still other opportunities for people to take advantage of.
These workshops have really become a thing, and so if people pay attention and look up where the workshops are, gene workshops, there are genealogists that come into town, often at public libraries and other organizations where it's free, because then you really gather the people who've done it, who want to do it, and there is that energy that says, what was the experience like for you? And that seems to be critical in this search for the gene.
And you mentioned there are some specific groups that are coming to town that people should look out for?
Yes, well, the genealogical societies are the ones that really are driving, at least with these DNA tests, because they find it so fascinating to include it in their genealogical search. So the two organizations here in town are the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, long title, as well as the Mecklenburg Genealogical Society. And both of those groups have really pushed the idea that we can have gene workshops and find out, what did you do? What are the best practices? And really coalesce around the idea of this search.
Help us understand, are there any concerns about security and privacy in this?
Well, there are, and people really need to think about what it is you want to find. Is it your heritage? Is it medical reasons? And realize the information that you're seeking. And it's like all transactions that are done, through the internet. You have concerns about whether there could be hacking and other breaches of confidences. But right now, it's so new that perhaps all the protective laws are not in place, but it's something to pay attention to and not let it catch you by surprise.
Thanks so much, Suzette. We appreciate the information.
Sure.
Ken Burns' The Gene and Intimate History will air here on PBS Charlotte on Wednesday, April 8th, and the following Wednesday, April 15th from 8 to 10 p.m. Well, the city of brotherly love, the Big Apple, the Windy City, and the City of Angels. Many American cities have a nickname, which most people recognize in an instant. Charlotte, of course, is known as the Queen City, but we also have an identifying mark, the Hornets Nest. Each name holds a significant place in the city's history, but as Carolina Impact's Jason Terz has found out, the Hornets Nest may or may not be the stuff of urban legends.
Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg, the wife of King George III and the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland in the 1700s, and the inspiration in 1768 for the name of a new city in North Carolina. From the Uptown statue to the city's logo to even garbage cans and recycling bins, the Queen and her crown are everywhere. But the Queen City has a second identifying mark, the Hornets Nest. Its backstory, though, isn't quite as clear.
Well, Lord Cornwallis, General Cornwallis, came here into Charlotte in the fall of 1780.
Charles Cornwallis, the leading general of the British Army during the Revolutionary War, led his troops to the area, but wasn't welcomed by the locals.
It didn't go well for Lord Cornwallis here in Charlotte.
A week after arriving, Cornwallis and his troops went to McIntyre Farm on Beatty's Ford Road, looking for supplies.
It begins at the farm of Mr. McIntyre. McIntyre has fled because the British soldiers occupying Charlotte have come up Beatty's Ford Road to seize the goods in his farm, and so they're slaughtering pigs and gathering up flour and barrels of whiskey and everything else they can find, and they disturb a hive of bees.
Those bees started attacking, and so too did the American patriots.
And there were bees stinging and there were bullets flying, and the British thought there was a much larger force than there actually was, and they hightailed it back to Charlotte. And this became known as the Battle of the Bees.
But it's what Cornwallis may or may not have said in the aftermath that has local historians a little perplexed.
It's a much-loved legend here in Charlotte that Lord Cornwallis called this area, it's a hornet's nest of rebellion. But the trouble is, we can't find that he ever actually said it or wrote it anywhere.
He may not have literally said that Charlotte was a hornet's nest of rebellion, but it's one of those stories that's come down to us that helps define who we are.
Lord Cornwallis may not have called this area Hornet's Nest, but he certainly would have agreed with the statement, and as far as Charlotte, North Carolina is concerned, he's kind of stuck with the statement.
Lord Cornwallis ended up surrendering the following year. The American Revolution was over, but it wasn't until the 1800s when references to the Hornet's Nest began appearing.
Now, in 1819, William Polk wrote a letter in which he describes a letter from a British officer referring to a hornet's nest.
Back in the Civil War, when Charlotteans put together a regiment to go off and fight, they called themselves the Hornets Nest Rifles.
Towards the end of the century, the Hornets name began appearing in athletics, with its first documented use coming in 1892. The earliest team baseball picture dates back to 1909. The next team to claim the name was Charlotte's first professional football team in the short-lived World Football League in 1974 and 75. Then, of course, there's the Hornets that we all know.
Warning, the shot, gone! Game over!
The original NBA Hornets were born in 1988, but after a falling out with the city and declining attendance, the team moved to New Orleans in 2002. The old Charlotte Coliseum may be long gone, but Hive Drive still exists. And when the New Orleans Hornets went through an ownership change and became the New Orleans Pelicans, there was only one thing left to do: bring the buzz back home.
And I'm pleased to announce that the Board of Governors has unanimously approved the Charlotte Bobcats application to change their name to the Charlotte Hornets, effective following the 2013-14 season.
The Hornets name isn't just for the basketball team. It's on everything from the county seal to schools, parks, antique car clubs, and locally produced beer. Even the annual Davidson-UNC Charlotte basketball game is billed as the Battle for the Hornets Nest.
The Hornets are the logo for the police department. Take a look at CMPD. It's on the police cars. It's on the uniform patches. Even the Girl Scouts. It's the Hornets Nest Council of Girl Scout Troops.
Monuments sitting alongside Beatty's Ford Road mark the spot where the Battle of the Bees took place. But the farmhouse where it happened, still riddled with bullet holes, was torn down in the 1940s.
I suppose that's the price of growth. If the price is a 170-year-old farmhouse being leveled that no one lives in anymore, so be it.
A hornet's nest of rebellion may or may not have been said.
Whether Cornwallis said it or didn't say it, it's something that we are proud of, that we're folks who think for ourselves, we're folks that question authority, and we're folks that took action once upon a day to change our government.
But it's come to symbolize a city and the people living in it. I get the feeling Queen Charlotte would be proud. For Caroline Impact, I'm Jason Tertis reporting.
Thanks so much, Jason. Unfortunately, our current Charlotte Hornets are going through another rebuilding process, as they have one of the worst records in the NBA this season. But we love them unconditionally. Their season wraps up in mid-April. That's all we have time for this evening. Thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate your time. And we look forward to seeing you back here again next time on Carolina Impact. Good night, my friends.
A production of PBS Charlotte.